Murder is the subject of this and subsequent presentations. Murder is not nice. Murder is not pretty. Murder is traumatic and murder is horrific. So, if you have come into this room unknowing what is going to be said here in this presentation, and this is not a subject that you would like to hear, or if you are under 16, take the opportunity, please, to leave. Now I'm worried, because there's a lot of you here, and I wonder why you're all here, knowing what we're going to talk about, and it brings me to one of three conclusions. The first one is that it's raining outside and there's nowhere else to go and you've come in here for shelter. The second one is that there's nothing else happening on the ship except this, and this is the only place you can come to. And I don't think that's true, because there's a lot happens on this beautiful ship. And the third one is that you've got a collective bloodlust, and you want me to provide you with some lusty, bloody stories. And I'm going to do that. So, let me just, before we start, introduce myself so that you know who I am and why I feel qualified to talk to you about what I'm going to talk about. My name is Tony Davey, and I am a retired police inspector from West Yorkshire Police. I didn't start in West Yorkshire Police. I began in Cleveland Police as a constable on my 19th birthday, 1970. I transferred to West Yorkshire Police in 1978, because I thought bigger was better, and I was promoted to sergeant in 1982, and then I was promoted to inspector in 1986. So, I am posted to West Yorkshire Police on transfer to a place called Manningham Division and to Queen's Road Police Station. Is there anybody in here who lives in Manningham? Anybody from Bradford? Is there anybody from Leeds, Halifax, Keighley or Manchester? Because you all will be involved in this presentation, because this is an area-wide criminal investigation. If you're from Manningham and you know the area, you'll recognise the places I'm going to talk about. The first thing I want to tell you is Queen's Road Police Station is the divisional headquarters of Manningham Division. And this is a picture of Queen's Road Police Station. It's a tiny building. It's on the edge of the division, and I'm going to show you a map now, and this is the map of Manningham, the area of Manningham in Bradford. And at the top left is Garden Lane, and that is where the subject of this presentation lived. At the bottom left is the area of Manningham Red Light District, and on the middle of the screen on the right is Queen's Road Police Station. It's all in walking distance, 10 or 20 minutes you can reach any part of it. It's heavily populated, very busy. But Manningham is a place of contrast. At one end, the Garden Lane end, is large suburban houses, wealth, parks, nice areas. It's got street lighting, would you believe? At the other end, Manningham is a hellhole. I thought I'd been posted to Helmand province, and it's full of derelict buildings, old mills, it's full of prostitution, drugs, gang culture, it's got high crime, it's got low wealth, and it's an absolute hellhole. And that was my beat, from the suburb at one end to the ridiculous at the other. Before we go any further though, I want to establish who we're talking about here and see how many of you out there know who we're talking about. So I'll ask you all now, put your hand in the air if you do not know the name the Yorkshire Ripper. Never heard of it? Very few of you. Yeah, very few. That's how I figured it would be. Now, put your hands in the air if you don't know the name of the Yorkshire Ripper. Still very few of you. So the Yorkshire Ripper has become famous through deeds bad deeds, murder, not because of anything good that he did. Could I also, I want to pick, this is the person responsible, Peter William Sutcliffe, also known as the Yorkshire Ripper. Could you now tell me, people of a certain age that is, me particularly, who that looks like from late 1960s, early 1970s television? Very popular man. Show every week. Thank you, yes, Jason King. That's Jason King, that's the Yorkshire Ripper. They look identical. I don't look anything like him. I tried. Never worked. Okay. So now I'll tell you a little bit about the upbringing of Peter Sutcliffe. Now, and everything I'm going to tell you about Peter Sutcliffe is relevant to the investigation that's to follow. And it's a long investigation. He was born in Bingley in 1946. So that's the year a monster was created. And he was in a middle-class Catholic family. But he was a loner. They're always loners, these people, always. And he went to school till he was 15, and then he left. And he had a couple of menial jobs, one of which was as a gravedigger, and that will become of crucial importance at the end of these presentations. So remember, that's very important, he was a gravedigger. Eventually, he met and married Sonia Sutcliffe. When he became of age, he gained his heavy goods vehicle licence because he now had a wife to support, and he got himself a job driving a wagon on night shifts all over the country, all over the north of England. So he was regularly seen at night driving. I knew him. I didn't know his name, but I saw him regularly enough. But then I saw the milkman, the postman, the taxi drivers, everybody who was out at night, I saw them. I didn't attach anything to them. Why would I be interested in Peter Sutcliffe? He had a nice house, he had a steady job, he had a lovely wife who was a school teacher. And I wouldn't notice him at all. He moved into his house in 1977. That's sometime after his marriage, because he lived with Sonia's parents. But the strange thing about that move into the house, it was 1 month after he had attempted to murder a woman, and 2 months before he did murder a woman. And in between this spree, he's moving house with his new wife. The house was lovely. This is a picture of the house. It's in the posh area of Manningham, a place called Heaton. It's very nice. He had a macabre sense of humour, and he was into voyeurism. And voyeurism in this context is people who go to the red light area to watch the prostitutes and the clients in the cars. They were a nuisance. They were a danger. And whilst prostitution wasn't legal, and we could do what we could to try and get prostitution off the streets, these people were a menace. The prostitutes complained about them, they got assaulted by the clients, and they caused no end of trouble. And he was one of many, although he didn't ever come to our notice in this voyeuristic world, because he lived in the area. Most of them didn't. But this presentation is not about so much Peter Sutcliffe or about his crimes. It's about the hunt for Peter Sutcliffe. A hunt which was marred from the word go, because there'd never been a crime or crimes of this magnitude ever encountered in Britain before, and there hasn't been since. Because this man murdered 13 women and tried to murder 10 others, and there was many other cases that the police tried to prove he had something to do with, and he didn't admit them. But he did admit 1 or 2 that they didn't think he might have done, just to make the issue more complex. He hated prostitutes. And his method of operation, or modus operandi, which I'll refer to as MO from now on, was to talk to a prostitute in the street, hit her over the head with a hammer, take her into some back alley, and then do whatever he did. And I'm not going to go into what he did, because I haven't got the stomach for it, and I don't think you have. and then he'd leave them. That was it. That was his regular MO. But he changed it so regularly that it caused problems and difficulties, because the police operate on an MO. It directs you to the person who's done it. If they change the MO all the time, it's very difficult. And if you're operating in different areas, it's really hard to catch people who do that. Not everybody was a prostitute that he attacked, but he thought they were. So, to sum it up, his crimes covered 12 divisions, policing divisions. They covered 6 cities. So that was Bradford, Leeds, Halifax, Huddersfield, Manchester and Keighley. 6 cities. And 2 police forces. And all of those caused difficulties. And it went from September 1969 to November 1980. There was many problems associated with this investigation. And this spread was one of the main complications. Let me explain how the policing was in those days, so you get a picture of the situation. There were no computers. There was no databases. There was no DNA. That wasn't even dreamt of. There was no crime squads. There was no murder squads. There was no regional squads. Cross borders weren't. They didn't cross policing borders. You didn't even cross divisional borders much without somebody's permission generally. Certainly not in West Yorkshire. So everything was done by writing it down on cards and keeping a card index. That's how it worked. So you couldn't there was no fingerprinting. In fact, did you know that to be a fingerprint expert, you had to have studied fingerprints for 7 years with a magnifying glass before you were competent to give evidence at court about somebody's fingerprints? Because fingerprint evidence is damning. If your fingerprint's somewhere, how on earth can you disprove that you had anything to do with it? So it was very important evidence. But it was all on paper. You rolled the thumbs and fingers on pieces of paper. Everything was old, but of course it was as modern as it could be at the time. I'd now like to tell you how a murder squad operated. And I speak only for West Yorkshire, but I'm sure it's standard across the whole policing spectrum. At the bottom, you had many detectives, all doing a single individual inquiry. It might be, go check out that car, see if the owner sold it, or see if you still got it, and then report back. That's all you needed to know. That was your job for the day. Go and do that. And another one would be doing something else, and there would be several inquiries. You didn't have to know all the ins and outs of the crime you were investigating, because you were just doing the simple job. Above that there was a second tier, which was the sergeants and the inspectors, and their job was to collate all the incoming information. Don't forget, it's all written down, and then discount those that are not good leads, and look for the good leads, and then send them out again with a second task, until you narrowed it down and kept narrowing it down. And at the top was the senior investigating officer and his team. And the senior investigating officer made all the decisions, the major decisions. Which direction the hunt would go, who would be arrested, what you would do about this, who's going to deal with the press, and organise everything. That's the main man. There was a detective in charge of a murder investigation, but he was assisted by lots. So it's not unusual for you to go to the house of the person who ultimately gets arrested for it to make a simple inquiry about whether or not he's got a pair of Wellington boots. And that would be important in this investigation. This presentation will show you how important all these things were to making this into a muddled investigation. Divisions dealt with their own murders. You didn't have a murder squad in the force. If there was a murder, the division dealt with it. Unless it was too big or too political, or then they would then call somebody in. But do you know, if you brought people into your division to investigate a murder, there was a lot of animosity towards them, bad feeling, and they were meant to feel as though they weren't welcome. And often it became quite nasty. You didn't want them to be there. But despite all that, arrest rates were high. And they were high because you were dealing with people in your division. People didn't travel away from the division to go and murder people. They murdered people in the locality. So they were either criminals who were known to the police, or they were careless in what they did, or they were known to the family or the person who they'd murdered. And our detection rates were high. It was practically unknown for people to move all around the north of England murdering people. I think we'll turn now to the crimes that were committed by Peter Sutcliffe. He started off with assaults before he moved on to murder. And there was 4 assaults started in September 1969. The first one, strangely enough, was in Manningham, where he hit a woman over the head with a hammer. He was arrested, but he wasn't charged because she withdrew the allegation. I don't know why she did that. Presumably because she was a prostitute, the police didn't deal with it too harshly or persuaded her otherwise. Maybe just told him off for doing it. I don't know, I'm speculating, but he was arrested but not charged, but he was fingerprinted. It was never linked to the Yorkshire Ripper inquiry until Peter Sutcliffe admitted it in interview when he was finally arrested many years later. This victim produced a photo fit of the person who'd assaulted her, and this is the photo fit. Now, who does that look like to you? There's 2 people who've already mentioned that looks like. Anybody out there know who that looks like? From the television? Jason King. Yeah. Okay, Jason King, you're right, it looks like Jason King. We're all detectives. We've solved this. Jason King did it. But he also looks like Peter Sutcliffe. There was even a second photo fit that she did. Still the same person. So she's still describing this same person. And that feature goes all the way through the investigation, but later on I'll tell you why it was flawed. There were then 3 more attacks. One in Keighley, which is not near Manningham. It's about 10 miles, 12 miles outside Bradford. And that means it's out in the country. And that person didn't die either. And then there was one in Halifax, well, that's on the moon. But it's a long way away. It's not actually, it's only about 15 miles, but you know, it's somewhere else, nobody goes there. So it wasn't linked. And then we're back to Keighley for another one. And that happened only 12 days after the one at Halifax. But the 2 at Keighley weren't linked, because one was a prostitute, one wasn't. The method of attacking was pretty much the same, hitting with a hammer, but that was a common weapon anyway. So none of these 4 were linked, and there's one big reason why these 4 weren't included in the investigation. None of them died. So they were just locally investigations that came to no conclusion. And there was many others going on, but these are the 4 that we're focusing on. So there is no serial killer at this time. There isn't even anything to link it, so there's nothing. So this is a muddled investigation right from the offset. Before anybody's got an inkling of what's going on, there's 4 women being attacked by a man with a hammer, and nobody has put them together. The first murder came in October 1975, and that was Wilma McCann, and there's a picture here of Wilma McCann. It's nondescript. Wilma McCann was a prostitute. Now, that happened in Leeds. Now, this is the first time Leeds has been mentioned here, but it's also the first murder. So a murder squad was set up by Leeds, at Leeds. And because she was a prostitute, the whole investigation was being dealt with in the red light area at Leeds. It wasn't widened. It wasn't considered to be anything other than a prostitute falling out with a client, and the client had reciprocated in the usual manner that clients do by beating her up, in this case, killed her. Was that decision right? Should they have widened it? It seemed to have been proved true when the next murder took place, which was only 80 days later in exactly the same area at Leeds. Another prostitute, Emily Jackson, were the police slack in withdrawing from the murder scene patrols that they'd put on in the area? Possibly, possibly not. Why would they keep patrols going when they only had one murder and they were investigating it and they thought it was a client, prostitute sort of murder? It wasn't going to happen again. Why would they have no reason to believe that that was going to be the case? And certainly not exactly the same place and only 80 days later. So manpower was not increased, or not kept increased. But the squad had to be enlarged because you've now got 2 murders. Are they linked? You've got to link them before you can put them together, but you've got 2 murders and a larger squad. But the important thing about this second murder was the Wellington boot. And in case you don't know, here's a picture of a Wellington boot. There was a boot print found at the scene of Emily Jackson's murder, and that boot print must have been made either by the killer or somebody who stood